Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, Israel hits a new landmark milestone in the fight against the coronavirus. But this time, thankfully, it's good news. Meanwhile, new parties and political partnerships take form ahead of fourth elections in March. And finally, a new Israeli discovery looks to completely reshape the world of sustainable agriculture. So stay tuned for more. To begin, early Tuesday morning in Israel was marked by red alert sirens blaring for the second time in a week, as yet another rocket was fired at Israel from the terror group-governed Gaza Strip. The IDF reporting that the projectile was fired towards kibbutz Kerem Shalom near the southern Israeli border with Egypt and Gaza. And the rocket failed to cross the border, however, instead landing somewhere within Gazan territory. And this after the IDF responded to rocket attacks over the weekend by striking rocket manufacturing sites, underground infrastructure, and a military post, all run by the Hamas terror group. The threat's never ending, though, as meanwhile, militant groups in the Strip begin a large-scale military drill. And 12 armed organizations are involved, including from Fatah and terror groups Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. The aim of the drill, to send a, quote, message of deterrence to Israel. Now, our top story tonight, finally some truly inspiring news on the coronavirus front. Israeli health ministry authorities hailing a different kind of landmark.
With the rate of vaccinations rising by the day, Israel's hitting a brand new milestone in its fight against the novel coronavirus. That is that more Israelis are now vaccinated than have ever been infected, with nearly 500,000 vaccines being doled out in just the last 9 days, about 99,000 of which were administered on Sunday alone. And Health Minister Yuli Edelstein's announcing the good news on social media. This as health officials ramp up vaccination drives towards the goal of giving 150,000 doses per day, as outlined by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who wants to get at least a quarter of the population inoculated by the end of January 2021. The premier, for his part, now also speaking with Pfizer to acquire more doses amidst rumors that Israeli stocks are running low. Meanwhile, lines for vaccinations continue to grow at local HMOs, clinics, and hospitals, as more and more in the population becomes eligible to receive the drug. And following medical personnel, people over 60 years old, and those with chronic illnesses who are already eligible, the next wave of vaccine volunteers is including active duty military, with teachers and school staff allegedly slated to be next in line starting later this week, which comes at just the right time as schools remaining open despite the country entering third lockdowns. On the other hand, with general closures in mind, Israeli health officials are now at least considering lifting the order for Israelis returning from abroad to have to quarantine in COVID hotels, arguing that home isolation is just as effective during a lockdown, and especially as more and more vaccinations are handed out. As for what is closed under the new lockdown rules, we remind you that Israelis will be barred from visiting another person's home, movement will be restricted to 1 kilometer from home with few exceptions, and public transportation will be limited to 50%. As for the economy, businesses without face-to-face customer interaction will be limited to 50% worker capacity, while other non-essential businesses, including leisure and entertainment venues, have all been ordered to close completely. This as current total infection numbers are still rising, now sitting at about 409,000, 38,600 actively sick, of whom nearly 600 are in serious condition, and the death toll rising to 3,256.
In other news, amidst the ongoing pandemic, big changes are hitting the economy. Among them, a significant drop in mergers and acquisitions despite record annual investments in the tech sector, and the lifting of limits on prime rate mortgages. But here to explain is Israeli consumer behavior expert and ILTV contributor, Vili Abraham. Thank you so much for being with us, Vili. Now, let's start with mortgages. What are the limits that are being lifted specifically?
Well, when you take a mortgage, there are two components. There's one where there's a fixed interest rate, and the other one which is indexed to the prime interest. So until now, when you took a mortgage, only a third of it would be indexed to the prime interest. And now what they want to do is they want to make this limitation to just 1/3. They want to increase it to 2/3 of the mortgage.
Well, so what does that mean for the average Israeli on the street?
Well, it means that a larger proportion of the mortgage will be indexed to the prime interest. So it means that your interest that you're paying will not be high to start with, meaning it will change in accordance with, the consumer price index and other indexes in the market. So overall, it's meant to make your repayments a lot lower.
All right, so and when will these changes take effect?
So we're talking about in a few weeks, but only for people who haven't taken up mortgage yet. For those who have a mortgage, this will come into effect only around March or April.
I see. So people who already have mortgages from before this change takes effect can still, benefit in some way from it?
Not now, only in March or April, they will be able to refinance and then benefit from a lower interest rate.
All right. Well, so let's move now to another new change, mergers and acquisitions apparently taking a dive in Israel. What can you tell us about this?
All right, so we'll look at mergers and acquisitions. We had a lot fewer deals this year, 2020. We're talking about 93 deals totaling $17 billion in comparison to 143 deals and amounting to $14.2 billion back in 2019.
So, and what does that mean? Is that really beneficial only for the tech sector or maybe for the society at large? How does that translate, to layman's terms?
Well, if we look at mergers and acquisitions, it might be a bit less relevant, although the government does benefit from the deals because it does, collect income tax. But if you look at investments that were raised from abroad, they were much more significant in 2020, even higher, much higher than 2019. And here, when a company raises capital by offering shares, right, it does what is called IPO, initial public offering, then the government makes money because when we buy shares, we pay income tax. So it makes a lot of money off of this. It can make millions from every deal.
All right, well, I'm sure a lot of people are waiting on pins and needles to see exactly how all of this plays out. Billy, thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure.
Moving on, with elections coming in faster than vaccinations can be administered, Israeli authorities are looking for new ways to ensure that the democratic process continues untainted by the coronavirus pandemic. And now it seems that the election committee has successfully come up with a plan, a unique array of drive-through polling stations intended only for the ill and which will hopefully minimize the risk of spreading the coronavirus infection.
זה דוגמה ראשונית, ממש, היא עדיין לא סופית.
מה עם אחרות?
של עמדת ההצבעה, כפי שאתם רואים, יגיע הבוחר למתחם הצבעה וסע, יוצמד לו לאחר שהוא יזדהה בפני ועדת הקלפי, הוא לא ירד מהרכב, הוא יציג את התעודה שלו, תוצמד לו עמדת ההצבעה לחלון.
All right, now for more, please make sure to visit our new and improved website at ILTV.tv and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for daily updates. Now, on another note, some Israelis may be asking themselves why they're now heading back to elections over the failure to pass a budget when Knesset members are now suddenly proving themselves more than capable of passing an interim budget, practically overnight. Chana Rifkin with the story.
We can't agree on a budget. Now perhaps the biggest lie in government, as the Knesset gives final approval for an interim financial package Monday night. The outline, increasing government spending in the absence of a true budget and linking the so-called continuing budget to the rate of population growth, as opposed to the consumer price index. And this effectively increasing next year's provisional budget by 4.5 billion shekels for a total of 419 billion or $130.2 billion. But to get the provisional budget passed, some major concessions had to be made. Finance Ministry sources telling Ynet News that several religious MKs conditioned their support on the preserving of stipends for yeshiva students, and this forcing cuts to the provisions for education, health, welfare, and more. Meanwhile, with a sort of budget out of the way, various political parties are still forming and reforming ahead of March elections. And among the latest overnight changes, Acting Defense Minister Benny Gantz's Blue and White Party continuing to bleed members. In addition to the resignation of senior lawmakers, including Foreign Minister Gabi Ashkenazi, Justice Minister Avi Nissenkorn, and Science Minister Yizhar Shai, Blue and White MK Michal Kotler-Wunsch is now the latest to announce that she will not be running on the Blue and White ticket, though she says that she is still committed to serving with courage and humility. As for Gantz's former partner Yair Lapid, Lapid and his oppositional Yesh Atid party are reportedly in talks to split from the Telem party under former Defense Minister Ya'alon, and to potentially partner instead with former Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni, who resigned from politics in 2019. This after the Zionist Union, of which she was part, was unilaterally dissolved by Avi Gabay, the then head of the Labour Party. And speaking of new partnerships, Tel Aviv Mayor Ron Huldai is now announcing that he too will be starting a new party for the coming vote, aimed at attracting the, quote, hundreds of thousands of Israelis who feel they have no home in the current political system. The New Hope party, started by former Likud member Gideon Sa'ar, on the other hand, is now unveiling its first primary campaign promise: to limit the prime minister to a maximum term of 8 years in office.
Now, with more on the coming fourth elections, we're joined by Israeli attorney and legal advisor for Meshilut, Simcha Rotman. Simcha, thanks so much for being with us. Now, there is a lot that has been changing right now. What should voters be focused on most?
If you ask me, I believe that the main issue that should stand in front of the Israeli voter is the justice system. People think that we are now in the fourth election in the past 2 years because that the system instability, or because Netanyahu, or whatever reason. People don't really take into account that we went to the first election because of the justice system canceling the ultra-Orthodox draft law, and we're going to all those elections because of the justice system, because of the legal system. Some would say because of the Netanyahu's cases, which are also an example of criminalizing politics. That's also some blame should be taken by the justice system. So the main issue should be the justice system and how to fix the problems with the separation of powers and checks and balances in Israel that are currently unbalanced.
Well, but with all the new parties, dissolving, reforming, new partnerships that are popping up, including with Justice Minister Avi Nissenkog now saying that he's going to be joining up with Tel Aviv Mayor Ron Huldai. What do you make of this? If you're saying that the justice system should be at the top of of the issue list for voters, where should they be looking for that?
I think that you can find in some parties people that are committed to the issue. I'm not sure that in the current system we have a party that says I am focusing all my efforts just on that and on nothing else. But you can find in mostly the right-wing parties, the Likud, you have few Knesset members, including former Justice Minister Amir Ohana, of course. In Yamina, you have few Knesset members, including former Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked. In the new Gideon Sa'ar party, Gideon Sa'ar himself has his own share of criticism of the justice system, and also other members like Elkin and others. You can find these ideologies all around the place, but you're right that currently we don't have a party that says we were going to focus only or mostly on fixing the justice system problems.
All right, well, I want to move then now maybe to Gideon Sa'ar's New Hope party, which you just kind of alluded to a little bit. What do you make of his new campaign promise to install 8-year term limits for the Prime Minister's office?
I think that the 8-year term limit to Prime Minister in the parliamentarian system, like Israel, is not really something wise to offer. Not because I think term limits are excellent idea, but when you have a coalition system, it's not like in the US you have a president, he has 4 years and maybe 8 years to do basically whatever he wants. He has some limits, but he can act on his own agenda and prove himself. In a parliamentarian system, how can you count years when the ability to act as a prime minister is determined not only by the fact that you are the prime minister, is also determined by the parties you have in your coalition.
I'm very curious to see how people will vote then in come March, especially based on this campaign promise, and what the rest of the public feels about term limits and whether or not they agree that they fit or don't fit in our parliamentary system. Simcha Roten, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
All right, now as Israel's government looks to reform for the fourth time in 2 years, you might be thinking, I can do better. And maybe you're right. But if you're serious about taking on the future, you'll need to know how to do so responsibly and sustainably, especially in the post-COVID era. And that's where a new international program at the IDC Herzliya comes in. In a brand new double major program, the famed international program of the IDC University in Herzliya is now showing the next generation of students what it takes to shape the future. And specifically, the newly updated sustainability and government program gives graduates a competitive advantage in both the private and public sectors in areas where policy and decision-making need to be balanced with international issues relating to the environment, economy, and society at large.
Through sustainability, we can provide the developmental needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs.
Well, recent graduates of the program, including Duna Cousins of Spain and Alexandria Cohen from the US, who partnered after meeting at IDC to create Hydria Water Innovations, a company focused on brokering sustainable and cost-effective solutions for water use and distribution. And Dean of the double major program, Professor Yoav Yair, goes on to explain how the program itself drives just such entrepreneurial action.
Graduates of the double major in government and sustainability will have the skills necessary to work in Israel or abroad and will be well suited to employment in government, the public sector, and relevant NGOs. The study program places a strong emphasis on practical experience through internships and a practicum, enabling graduates of the program to fit into startups in the areas of sustainability or clean tech, or to be sustainable experts in the private and public sectors.
But of course, don't just take my word for it. Students at IDC themselves describing their incredible education.
החיבור בין קיימות, יזמות ועסקים זה משהו שלגמרי הרווחתי בתוך המרכז הבינתחומי, ואני מאוד שמחה שבחרתי במסלול הזה.
העובדה שאני יכול לפנות למרצה שלי ולהעלות איזשהו רעיון והיא תעזור לי לממש אותו, זה משהו שמאוד מאפיין את הבינתחום.
Joining me now with the details of the new government and sustainability double major at the IDC Herzliya is Professor Yoav Yair, Dean of the International Program at IDC. Thank you so much for being with us, Professor. Now, for our readers who are unfamiliar with the concept, walk us through what sustainability is.
Well, sustainability is a word that was coined by the UN in 1998, and it actually gives a roadmap for balancing future development with the economical needs of the present, but with future needs of future generations, and finding the balance in this triangle of society, economy, and environment, which means develop what you need today, but don't leave the earth destroyed for future generations, which sadly, what we have been doing in the past couple of decades leaves a big problematic heritage for future generations, which we need to fix and correct. And this is what our program at IDC aims for, to teach the way to move forward, but sustainably and wisely so.
So, as you said, if sustainability has been around for a little while now, why is it so important these days in the era of post-COVID?
I think what the corona pandemic showed us was that we have moved the balance between nature and humans to a point that it's no longer sustainable. And this is one of the prices we're paying for invading into those areas where we haven't been before, utilizing earth resources to the point that we cannot support the natural system anymore. So we need to find a new balance between humanity and nature, humanity and environment. And in the post-COVID area, when we recuperate and the economy reinvigorates itself, it's clear to us right now that there will be a new path, a new road, and it will be sustainable and green. And you can talk about the green exit strategy and the Green New Deal in the US. European Union already puts trillions of dollars or euros into developing programs for a more sustainable future for Europeans, but it's going to be global because we have no alternatives. The other way is really destructive and really dangerous to the continuation of humanity. So we need to be sure that the future is sustainably put, planned, and executed.
Wow. All right. So, speaking about, all these new initiatives, to make a greener, more sustainable Earth. Is Israel a big player in the sustainability scene? I know we're the high-tech startup nation, but what about with this?
Yeah, okay, so this is a certain asset that Israel in particular has, because we've been doing water research and agricultural development for decades now. We are experts in desert climate, desert association of how to build agricultural needs to sustain food in low yield areas of the country. So we've been doing that for decades. And Israel is a startup nation, as you mentioned. And certainly we just need to harness this innovation, these tools, this capability, and use it for advancing the sustainable development goals of the UN, those 17 targets that we need to address: clean the planet, fix the planet, prosper the planet. And we can do it. Israel is a good hub for beta testing, for initial ideas coming up, and then spread them globally, as we've done before.
So, do you think then that this new push towards sustainability, that Israel is particularly in a good position for that because of our history, as you said, with agriculture and sustainability already, or does Tikkun Olam have anything to do with it, or is it really more the first?
Actually, it's a big Jewish value to do Tikkun Olam, fix the planet, and so we teach that as well. So it's this balance between our, let's say, shlichut or mission to do good on this planet, but also to prosper and make money, do good business, while advancing the solutions this planet needs. And as I said, Israel is well suited. Our program really uses our history and our experience and our expertise to teach our students the basic needs, the basic tools that they will employ in the new decades to come. They will be needed. They are already needed. Graduates of our school are already employed in startup companies, in ministries, in government, and in NGOs. Everywhere you see sustainability graduates from the double major program at IDC.
All right. Well, Professor Yair, I want to thank you so much for joining us today, and good luck saving the planet, I guess.
Thank you. Yes, this is the mission.
Now, speaking of sustainability, a new breakthrough may soon be the nail in the coffin for many dangerous chemical fertilizers. Israeli scientists discovering that plants native to desert regions can find more than enough nutrients from within the dust in the atmosphere. In fact, according to the researchers at Ben-Gurion University in the Negev, plants like wheat and chickpeas even adapt themselves for such a scenario by growing more hairs on their leaves when they're short on phosphorus, which is necessary to support all living things. And the hairs in question work by trapping moisture in the air, which then traps dust particles full of phosphorus. And finally, the leaves ooze an acid that breaks down the phosphorus into a form useful to the plant. Meanwhile, in another experiment with lettuce, plants starved of phosphorus but then sprinkled with desert dust doubled in size without ever touching soil. Authors of the study explaining that this knowledge could potentially lead to a massive reduction in the use of chemical phosphate fertilizers known to be horrendous for the environment. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be clear and cool with lows around 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow you can expect more clear and sunny skies with a slight rise in temperatures for an average high of 69 degrees Fahrenheit or 21 degrees Celsius. And now before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. Here we have it, the IDF making Israel cookies ahead of the holidays. I'm not usually one for that much icing, but those look pretty good. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.22 shekels to the American dollar and 2.51 shekels to the Canadian dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And then don't forget to visit the all-new and improved ILTV website at iltv.tv and let us know what you think. Just don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter for the latest updates while you're there. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you so much for watching.